Grandma confesses, "My daughter said I won't support you even after a lifetime dedicated to her." Kicked out of her home, she pretended to be weak, but was preparing her last and most powerful response. Behind her fragile appearance were documents, investments, and secrets that no one imagined. And on the day she was meant to be discarded, she turned the tables in front of a family that never truly knew her. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The rain beat persistently against the windows of the house, creating a melancholy rhythm that echoed through rooms empty of laughter. Martha adjusted the shawl over her shoulders and watched the drops sliding down the glass, each carrying a piece of the grey March afternoon. It had been 3 months since Richard passed away, 3 months since silence had permanently settled in the hallways that once buzzed with animated conversations, grandchildren's games, and the constant sound of the television during family dinners. At 72, Martha discovered that widowhood wasn't just the absence of a person, but the complete transformation of an existence. It was as if, along with Richard, they had also taken away her identity, her purpose, her reason for being in that home she had built with such care throughout 47 years of marriage. The walls remained the same, the decor untouched, but something indefinable had changed forever. The phone rang, interrupting her reflections. It was Jennifer, her youngest daughter, with that hurried voice that Martha knew so well since her rebellious teenage years. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come over this afternoon?" Martha felt a tightness in her chest. In recent days, Jennifer had become strangely solicitous, asking about bills, documents, plans for the future, questions she had never asked before, displays of concern that came too late. "Of course, sweetheart. You know this will always be your home." On the other end of the line, there was a prolonged pause. Martha could almost hear Jennifer's thoughts organizing, preparing words that would certainly not be easy to pronounce. "All right, Mom. See you later." Martha hung up the phone and returned to the window. The rain had diminished, but the sky remained heavy, promising more storms for the end of the day. She knew by a maternal instinct that 49 years of motherhood had honed that the approaching conversation would change everything. While waiting, Martha walked through the house, observing each detail with different eyes. The living room, where she had received so many friends, celebrated birthdays, graduations, and her children's achievements. The kitchen, where she had prepared thousands of meals, where she had taught her daughters to cook dishes she had learned from her own mother. The master bedroom, now just hers, where she could still smell Richard's cologne permeating the clothes she couldn't bring herself to donate. Each room told a story, held memories that only she could preserve. She was the unofficial historian of the family, the guardian of traditions, the bridge between generations, or at least that's what she had always believed herself to be. Around 4 in the afternoon, Jennifer arrived accompanied by her husband, Brian. Martha found his presence strange but didn't comment. She prepared coffee, served the homemade cookies she still made every week out of habit, and sat in the armchair that Richard always said was exclusively hers. "Mom," Jennifer began, avoiding direct eye contact, "Brian and I have been talking about your situation here at home." Martha held the coffee cup firmly, feeling the warmth of the porcelain against her palms. There was something in her daughter's tone that put her on alert, a formality that didn't exist between them before. "We know it must be very difficult to stay alone in this big house with so many memories of Dad," Brian intervened, assuming the air of someone who believes they're being kind. "And we also understand that the maintenance must be burdensome, the bills, the upkeep." Martha remained silent, observing. 49 years of raising children had taught her that sometimes the most important things weren't the words spoken, but those caught in the throat, waiting for the right moment to emerge. "What exactly are you trying to say?" she asked, with the serenity she had always shown in moments of family tension. Jennifer took a deep breath, like someone preparing to dive into deep and turbulent waters. "Mom, you need to understand that things have changed. This house is too big for just one person, and we have our own responsibilities. The boys are growing. They need more space to study. Brian is thinking about setting up a home office." The words reached Martha's ears like fragments of a distant conversation. She continued holding the cup, but no longer felt its warmth. A strange coldness began to spread through her chest, rising to her throat. "We're suggesting that you consider some alternatives," Brian continued, consulting notes on a folded paper. There are very good specialized residences in the area, places where you would have company, specialized medical care, activities suitable for your age. Specialized residences, Martha repeated slowly, testing the words in her mouth like someone tasting something bitter. Retirement homes, Mum. Quiet, safe places where you wouldn't have to worry about anything, Jennifer explained, finally finding the courage to use the right words. Martha placed the cup on the saucer with a precise, controlled movement. She looked at her daughter, then at her son-in-law, and finally at her own hands, marked by time but still firm, still capable. And what if I don't want to go to a retirement home? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jennifer and Brian exchanged quick glances, the kind couples develop after years together, glances that dispense with words. "Mom, you need to be realistic," Jennifer said, and there was a new hardness in her voice, a determination that Martha didn't recognize. "If you stay here, you'll have to contribute to the expenses. We can't keep supporting this house by ourselves anymore." "Support this house?" Martha repeated, feeling something silently breaking inside her chest. "This house that your father and I built, that we paid for over 30 years, where you grew up, where your children play in the yard that I planted myself. Things have changed, Mom. Dad is no longer here and you don't work, you don't have your own income. It would be fairer if you contributed or found a place more suitable for your situation." Martha closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of each word. When she opened them again, there was something different in her gaze, a cold lucidity that even she didn't know she possessed. "I understand," she said simply. Brian seemed surprised by the calmness of her reaction. He had prepared for tears, pleas, perhaps even emotional resistance. He hadn't expected that disturbing serenity. "I need time to think," Martha continued, rising from the armchair with dignity. "It's an important decision that will affect the rest of my life." Jennifer hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, but Brian was already standing up, clearly relieved there hadn't been a dramatic scene. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson, take all the time you need. But, well, it would be good if we could resolve this soon. We have some plans for the house." Martha accompanied them to the door, saying goodbye with kisses on the cheek, as she had always done. But when the door closed, she remained there for long minutes, leaning against the wood, listening to the sound of the car moving away on the wet street. The house was silent again, but it was a different silence, no longer the silence of longing or loneliness, but something deeper, more disturbing. It was the silence of someone who had just discovered that, at 72, she had become a burden, a dead weight, a problem to be solved by people she had once carried in her arms. Martha returned to the living room, collected the cups, washed them in the kitchen sink. Each movement was executed with automatic precision, while her mind slowly processed the magnitude of what had just happened. 47 years of marriage, 49 years of motherhood, decades of unconditional dedication, and now she was seen as a burden. Night fell without her noticing. Martha remained seated at the kitchen table, looking at the bills organized in orderly piles. Documents that she had always been the one to organize, although Richard took the credit for being the family's official provider. For 3 days, Martha pretended that the conversation with Jennifer had been just a misunderstanding, a hasty suggestion that would soon be forgotten. She maintained her usual routine. Woke up at 6 in the morning, prepared coffee, watered the plants in the garden, organized the house that was already impeccable. But there was a subtle difference in her movements, a renewed attention to details, as if she were seeing everything for the first time or perhaps for the last. On Thursday morning, the phone rang again. It was Jennifer, and her voice carried a poorly disguised impatience. "Mum, have you thought about what we discussed?" Martha held the receiver firmly, feeling the weight of the question. "I'm still reflecting, honey. Look, Mom, I don't want to be rude, but I need you to understand our situation. Brian lost some important clients at his firm. The boys are growing and needing more things, and this house represents an opportunity for us. An opportunity. We could sell it and use the money to pay off our debts, buy a smaller apartment for you in a more suitable place. Everyone wins." Martha felt a strange chill run down her spine. It was no longer just about her staying in the house. It was about the house itself, about the value it represented, about the transformation of her life into numbers on an Excel spreadsheet. "Jennifer, this house is in my name too. It can't be sold without my authorization." There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. Martha could almost hear her daughter's thoughts reorganizing, recalculating strategies. "Of course, Mom, that's why we're talking. We want you to participate in the decision. But think about it. You alone in this big house, with all these responsibilities, wouldn't it be more peaceful in a smaller place with people your age?" After hanging up, Martha remained seated next to the phone for almost an hour. Jennifer's words echoed in her mind, but there was something more disturbing growing in her chest. The gradual perception that she wasn't being treated as a mother, but as an obstacle to be circumvented. That afternoon, she decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She visited Eleanor, her longtime neighbor. Eleanor was 81 and enviably lucid, with life experience that included 3 ungrateful children and an inheritance lawsuit that lasted more than a decade. "My dear Martha," said Eleanor, serving tea in her living room cluttered with family photographs. "You look worried. What's happening?" Martha hesitated, but something in her friend's understanding gaze encouraged her to speak. She told her about the conversation with Jennifer, about the suggestions of a retirement home, about the subtle but constant pressure to make a decision. Eleanor listened in silence, occasionally nodding her head. When Martha finished, the elderly woman set her cup on the saucer with a dry sound. "Martha, do you know the story of the frog in boiling water?" "I don't understand." "They say that if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you put it in warm water and heat it gradually, it doesn't notice the danger and ends up dying cooked." Martha furrowed her brow, trying to understand the analogy. "Your daughter isn't being cruel all at once," Eleanor explained. "She's warming the water gradually. First it was the gentle suggestion of the retirement home. Now it's the financial pressure. Next it will be something else. Until you have no choice left." Eleanor's observation echoed in Martha's mind throughout the week. She began to pay more attention to family conversations, to the glances exchanged between Jennifer and Brian, to the seemingly innocent comments from her grandchildren. The following Saturday, during the family lunch that traditionally happened at her house, Martha decided to test a theory. She pretended to forget where she had kept a key to the safe, looked for glasses that were on top of her head, and confused the name of one of her grandsons. The reactions were immediate and revealing. Brian and Jennifer exchanged significant glances, whispered comments about concerning signs, and natural deterioration with age. The grandchildren, previously affectionate, began to treat her with that exaggerated patience reserved for small children or people considered mentally limited. "Grandma's getting forgetful," she heard one grandson comment to the other in the hallway. "Mom says it's normal at her age." Martha felt a mixture of sadness and anger. Not only was she being discarded, but her own family was constructing a narrative to justify the disposal. If she was forgetful, if her mind was failing, then obviously she couldn't make decisions about her own life. That night, after everyone had left, Martha went up to the attic for the first time in years. Among dusty boxes and old furniture, she found what she was looking for. A brown leather folder, carefully stored, containing documents that not even Richard had fully known about. During 47 years of marriage, Martha had developed a special skill, the art of financial invisibility. While Richard believed he controlled all the family finances, she created a parallel, discreet, but efficient system. Part of the household budget money was systematically diverted to investments in her name, small amounts that, over the years, transformed into considerable assets. There were also the jobs she had done for years without fanfare, sewing for neighbors, sweets sold at school festivities, small services that Richard considered women's pastimes, but that she had turned into extra income, always saved, always invested. The folder contained statements from bank accounts at 3 different banks, certificates of deposit, investment fund shares, and something that not even she had expected to see. The deed to a small apartment she had bought 5 years earlier, when the real estate market was down, using money from an inheritance from Aunt Evelyn that Richard hadn't even known existed. Martha spent the night organizing the documents, calculating values, planning. When the sun rose, she knew exactly what to do. On Monday, she called Jennifer with a fragile, slightly trembling voice. "Honey, could you come over today? I'm feeling a bit confused with these bank things, and I think I need your help organizing my papers." On the other end of the line, Martha could almost feel Jennifer's satisfied smile. Finally, the old woman was yielding, admitting her incapacity. asking for help. "Of course, Mom. I'll come over after lunch. Brian can come too, he understands these things." Martha hung up the phone and smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of determination. She had spent 3 months being treated like a problem to be solved. Now it was time to reveal that some problems are more complex than they appear. She prepared coffee, arranged cookies on a nice platter, and carefully selected some documents to leave in view on the living room table. Not all of them, just some old checking account statements and some electricity and phone bills. Enough to create the illusion of a disoriented elderly woman needing help organizing simple paperwork. When Jennifer and Brian arrived, Martha received them with a slightly confused expression, vaguely gesturing toward the scattered papers. "I can't understand these things anymore," she said in a weak voice. "Richard used to take care of everything before, and now I don't even know where to start." Brian approached the table with the air of someone who would take control of the situation. Jennifer followed him, already mentally organizing the next steps, taking power of attorney from her mother, organizing finances, accelerating the process of selling the house. But when Brian began to examine the documents, his expression gradually changed. He picked up one bank statement, then another, frowning. "Mrs. Wilson, do you have other accounts besides this one?" Martha feigned confusion. "Other accounts? I don't know. Richard always said it was better to have everything in one place." Jennifer approached, looking over her husband's shoulder. The statement showed an account with a low balance, small transactions, exactly what they expected to find. A widow with few resources, dependent on her family. "Mom, we're going to organize everything properly," Jennifer said in a condescending tone. "Brian will check your accounts, your pension rights, and we'll see the best way to manage your money going forward." Martha nodded with docility, but inside she felt a strange satisfaction. She let them photograph documents, write down numbers, make plans. She let them believe they had taken control of the situation. When they left, promising to return the following week with a detailed proposal for her new life, Martha returned to the attic. She stored the brown leather folder with redoubled care, and for the first time in 3 months she slept deeply. During the following week, Martha perfected her performance. She began to forget where she kept important objects, asked twice about matters that had already been discussed, and occasionally called Jennifer by her older sister's name. Each lapse was carefully calculated, each moment of confusion strategically positioned to build the image of an elderly woman losing the ability to manage her own life. Brian quickly assumed the role of unofficial financial manager. He visited Martha almost daily, always with a folder of documents under his arm, asking questions about banks, insurance, and properties. Martha responded with studied vagueness, letting him believe he was discovering information that she herself had forgotten. "Mrs. Wilson, do you remember if Richard had any life insurance?" Brian would ask, consulting his notes. "Insurance? Oh yes, I think so. Or maybe not. He talked about so many things," Martha would respond, feigning uncertainty. In reality, Martha knew every detail of the family finances better than any accountant. She knew about Richard's life insurance, about the investments he believed he had made alone, but that she had discreetly suggested, about every penny that came in and went out of the house for decades. But she let Brian believe he was being the family's financial detective, discovering hidden treasures. During these visits, Martha observed with growing attention the whispered conversations between Brian and Jennifer. She began to realize that the rush to resolve her situation wasn't just from the desire to free up the house. Brian was indebted far beyond what he had initially admitted. There were pending loans, credit cards at their limits, and his accounting firm was facing a serious client crisis. Martha's house wasn't just an opportunity, it was an urgent necessity. "Mum, we've found a wonderful residence for seniors," Jennifer announced one Thursday afternoon, showing colorful brochures. "It's only 20 minutes from here. Has 24-hour nursing, recreational activities, a well-maintained garden." Martha pretended to examine the brochures with interest, but internally she was calculating. The monthly value of the residence would consume exactly the pension she received from Richard, plus a little extra that would have to come from the meager resources they believed to be her only source of income. In practice, she would become completely dependent on the family for any additional expense, any emergency, any personal desire. It seems very expensive," Martha murmured, feigning concern. "Don't worry about that, Mom. We'll manage everything for you. Brian is already organizing your papers, and when we sell the house, there will be enough money left to guarantee your comfort for many years. The word "we sell" echoed in Martha's mind. Not when you decide to sell or if you want to sell, but when we sell, as if the decision had already been made, as if she were just a formality in the process. That night, Martha made a crucial decision. It was time to accelerate her own plans. On Friday morning, she left the house earlier than usual, using the pretext of going to the bank to resolve problems with her pension. In truth, she headed to the downtown area, to a law office she had discreetly researched during the week. Dr. Thomas Hamilton was a lawyer specializing in family law and successions, with a solid reputation and, according to her online research, experience in cases involving the elderly and asset issues. Martha had made the appointment using a slightly different name, a precaution she had learned years earlier when dealing with legal matters without Richard knowing. "Mrs. Taylor," Dr. Hamilton received her in an elegant but welcoming office. "How can I help you?" Martha told her story with clinical precision, without dramatizations, but without omitting important details. She talked about the pressure to go to a retirement home, about the plans to sell the house, about the way she was being treated by her family. Dr. Hamilton listened attentively, making occasional notes. When Martha finished, he leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. "Mrs. Taylor, legally, no one can force you to go to a geriatric residence against your will, unless mental incapacity is proven through medical and judicial evaluation. And as for the house, if it's in your name, no one can sell it without your express authorization. But what if they try to prove that I'm no longer mentally capable of making decisions? That would require a complex judicial process, with psychiatric evaluations, witnesses, and a lot of time. It's not something easily achieved." Martha breathed a sigh of relief, but Dr. Hamilton continued. "However, psychological pressure, emotional manipulation, and social isolation can be equally effective in forcing decisions. I suggest we document everything, that you have reliable witnesses, and that you prepare a preventive legal strategy." For 2 hours, Martha and Dr. Hamilton planned a detailed strategy. She would update her will, create documents attesting to her mental lucidity, and establish an asset protection plan that included a very specific and limited power of attorney. More importantly, Dr. Hamilton suggested that Martha document all conversations with her family, preferably through recordings or in the presence of witnesses. "And there's one more thing," Martha said, hesitating. "I have some resources that my family doesn't know about. Investments, a property. Would it be possible to protect these assets?" Dr. Hamilton smiled for the first time during the meeting. "Mrs. Taylor, women of your generation were often more foresighted than they're given credit for. Yes, we can structure everything so that your assets remain protected, regardless of family pressures." Upon leaving the office, Martha felt different. No longer the disoriented widow her family imagined, but a woman with a plan, with resources, and with rights she knew how to exercise. During the weekend, Jennifer and Brian intensified the pressure. They brought more brochures for retirement homes, talked about specialists who could evaluate her living conditions, mentioned neighbors who were concerned about her living alone. "Mum, yesterday Mrs. Patterson told me that you forgot the plants in the sun and they almost died," Jennifer said, assuming a tone of maternal concern. "Don't you think these little forgetful moments might be signs that you need more care?" Martha knew that Mrs. Patterson, a gossipy and envious neighbor, would be capable of inventing any story if it gave her a few minutes of attention, but she limited herself to assuming a worried expression. Maybe you're right," she said slowly. "Sometimes I do feel a bit confused." Brian and Jennifer exchanged a discreet look of triumph. Finally, she was yielding, admitting that she needed help, accepting that she could no longer live alone. "Don't worry, Mom," Jennifer said, hugging her with an affection she hadn't shown for weeks. "We'll take care of everything. You just need to trust us." Trust. The word echoed in Martha's mind with a bitter taste. For 49 years, she had blindly trusted the family she had raised. She had dedicated her entire life to people who now saw her as a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. That night, Martha went up to the attic again, this time not to review documents but to make a final decision. On Monday, she would put into action the plan she had been developing. It was time to stop pretending weakness and show exactly how strong a 72-year-old woman could be when underestimated by the people she should be able to trust the most. She looked out the attic window, observing the quiet street, the houses where neighbors she had known for decades lived. Some of them faced similar situations, adult children who saw their elderly parents as financial burdens. It was a more common problem than she had imagined, a silent epidemic of disrespect disguised as concern. But Martha had discovered something that many of her generation didn't know. She didn't have to passively accept the fate that others were trying to impose. She had resources, she had rights, and now she had a plan. Monday dawned clear and sunny, contrasting with the storm that Martha knew she was about to unleash. During breakfast, she mentally rehearsed each word, each gesture she would make in the coming hours. At 72, she was about to give the most important performance of her life. At 10 in the morning, she called Jennifer with a trembling voice, almost whispering, "Honey, can you come over now and bring Brian too? I need to talk about the retirement home." On the other end of the line, Jennifer could barely disguise her satisfaction. "Of course, Mom, we'll be there in an hour." Martha hung up and smiled. It was the last time she would pretend weakness. When Jennifer and Brian arrived, they found Martha in the living room, apparently defeated, with a small suitcase next to the armchair and some documents spread out on the coffee table. "Mom, you've already packed your things?" Jennifer asked, surprised by the quickness of the decision. "I spent the night thinking," Martha said in a weak voice. "You're right. I can't live alone anymore. It's getting too difficult. Maybe it is better to go to a place where there are people prepared to take care of me." Brian approached the table, observing the documents. They were deeds to the house, bank statements, insurance policies, all organized as if Martha were preparing her transfer of assets. "You made the right decision, Mrs. Wilson," Brian said, automatically taking control of the situation. "We'll organize everything to make the transition as smooth as possible." "I have just one condition," Martha said, raising her eyes with a gleam that Brian couldn't identify. "I want the whole family to be present when I sign the papers. My grandchildren, too. After all, they're the ones who will inherit all this someday." Jennifer hesitated. "Mom, it doesn't have to be that formal. We can resolve everything today." "No," Martha said with unexpected firmness. 47 years of marriage, 49 years of motherhood, an entire lifetime in this house. I deserve a proper farewell." Brian and Jennifer exchanged glances. There was something in Martha's insistence that made them uncomfortable, but they couldn't argue against such a reasonable request. "All right, Mom. I'll call the boys," Jennifer agreed. "Can they come after lunch?" "Perfect. And call Eleanor too. She's my oldest neighbor. I'd like her to be present." At 3 in the afternoon, Martha's living room was full. Jennifer and Brian sat on the sofa. The 2 teenage grandsons occupied the side armchairs, and Eleanor, the octogenarian neighbor, settled into the chair that Martha had offered her with special courtesy. Martha had prepared coffee and served homemade cookies for the last time, as she had said. There was also a side table with a brown leather folder that no one had noticed before. "Well," Martha began, still with the slightly trembling voice she had maintained for weeks, "I've gathered you all here because it's time to make some important decisions about my life." Jennifer nodded with benevolence. "We know it's not easy, Mom, but you'll see how good it will be to have professional care, people your age to talk to." "Let me finish, honey," Martha interrupted, and there was something different in her tone. "During these 3 months since your father passed away, I've learned a lot about you all, about myself, about what I mean to this family." Brian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. There was a subtle change in the atmosphere of the room, as if the air had become denser. "I've learned that, at 72, I've become a burden. Dead weight that needs to be managed, controlled, removed to a suitable location." "Mom, it's not like that," Jennifer protested, but her voice sounded artificial. "I also learned," Martha continued, walking slowly to the side table, "that you believe I'm a confused, forgetful old woman, incapable of managing my own life." She picked up the brown leather folder and returned to the center of the room. Eleanor watched attentively, an almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "So before signing any document, before moving to where you've decided, I thought it would be interesting to clarify some things about this confused old woman you want to institutionalize." Martha opened the folder and began to remove documents, methodically placing them on the coffee table. Bank statements, investment certificates, deeds, financial application receipts. "This first statement," she said, showing the paper to everyone, "is from an account I've maintained at First National Bank for 15 years. Current balance, $280,000. The silence in the room became sepulchral. Jennifer opened her mouth but couldn't utter a single word. This second one, Martha continued imperturbably, is from Chase Bank, 190,000 in CDs. This third is from Wells Fargo, where I have investments in mutual funds worth 160,000. Brian had gone completely pale. The numbers didn't make sense. How had a housewife with no income of her own accumulated such an amount? And this, Martha said, removing a folded deed, is the deed to a 2-bedroom apartment in the Heights neighborhood, which I bought 5 years ago. Current market value, approximately $300,000. One of the grandsons whispered "Jesus" under his breath. Eleanor continued smiling, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Oh, and there are also these smaller investments, Martha continued, spreading more documents. Treasury bonds, shares in state-owned companies, a small stake in a real estate fund. In total, about $850,000. The math hit Brian like a punch to the stomach. Martha wasn't a poor dependent widow. She was a woman with assets greater than what he had managed to accumulate throughout his entire professional career. How is this possible? Jennifer finally managed to speak, her voice coming out as a harsh whisper. 47 years of household economics, honey. 47 years saving pennies, investing budget surpluses, selling sweets and sewing, applying inheritances you never knew I received. 47 years being financially invisible while secretly supporting this family. Martha returned to the folder and removed more documents. These are proof of transfers I made over the years. Brian, do you remember when you needed money to open your office? $40,000 that came from my account, disguised as a loan from Richard. Brian swallowed hard. He remembered perfectly. Jennifer, the down payment on the house where you live, $60,000, also mine. And the orthodontic treatment for the boys? $15,000 each. The car Brian bought last year, $35,000. All of this came from my accounts. Always discreetly, always through your father, so you would never know you depended on a simple housewife. The revelation fell upon the family like a devastating avalanche. Each document that Martha showed dismantled years of presumptions, of disguised contempt, of systematic underestimation. During these weeks, you've discussed my life as if I were a logistical problem. You calculated the value of the house, planned my institutionalization, decided my future, all this believing I was a financial burden. Martha calmly put away the documents and faced each family member. Well, I have news for you. This confused and forgetful old woman is not going to any retirement home. This house remains mine, and I will continue living in it. And from today on, all the financial support you've received over the years is officially cancelled. Mom, wait, Jennifer tried to intervene, but Martha silenced her with a gesture. I'm not finished, Brian. Your financial problems are no longer my responsibility. If your office is failing, find solutions that don't involve selling your mother-in-law's house. Jennifer, if you have debts, learn to live within your actual means, without counting on resources that were never yours. The older grandson tried to speak, but Martha continued, relentless. And you boys, who started treating me as if I were a big child, can start paying for your own school tuition, your English courses, your school supplies. Forgetful grandma just remembered that generosity should not be confused with obligation. Eleanor began to applaud slowly, breaking the tense silence. Bravo, Martha, bravo. Now, Martha said, turning to Eleanor, would you like to be my witness while I update my will? I need to ensure that my assets are left to people who truly respect me. Brian finally found his voice. Mrs. Wilson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We never wanted to disrespect you, just get rid of me in the most convenient way possible, Martha completed. But I understand, Brian. For months you've been living with a woman who pretended to be fragile, confused, dependent. It was natural that you would believe the performance. Martha walked to the window and observed the garden she had planted with her own hands decades earlier. The truth is that I've never been so lucid as in these last 3 months. The pain of loss taught me things about myself that I had forgotten. It taught me that I'm not just someone's wife or someone's mother. I'm Martha, and Martha has sufficient resources to live with dignity, independence, and respect. She turned back to the family, who remained in uncomfortable silence. You can go now. Eleanor will stay to help me organize some legal documents. And don't worry about me. This forgetful old woman has an excellent lawyer and friends who truly care about her well-being. One by one, the family members stood up and walked toward the door. Jennifer hesitated at the threshold, as if wanting to say something, but the words didn't come. Brian lowered his eyes, unable to face Martha's serene gaze. When the door closed, Eleanor let out a laugh of pure satisfaction. "My dear, what a magnificent performance. You left them completely disconcerted." Martha smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "You know, Eleanor, the hardest part wasn't pretending to be fragile. It was discovering that my own family believed I actually was. And now, what will you do?" Martha looked around the room, observing each object, each piece of furniture, each photograph that told the story of a lifetime. "Now I'm going to live, Eleanor. I'm going to travel to places I've always wanted to visit. I'm going to do things I've always postponed. I'm going to discover who Martha is when she's not taking care of everybody." "And your family?" "My family learned an important lesson today about underestimating people. If they manage to assimilate that lesson, who knows, maybe one day we can rebuild our relationship based on mutual respect. If they can't—" Martha shrugged. "I have $85,000 invested and enough time to make new friends." Eleanor laughed again. "Martha, you inspire me. At my 81 years, you make me want to be braver." "Courage has no age, Eleanor. It only has opportunity. And today was my opportunity." That night, for the first time in 3 months, Martha slept deeply, no longer as the helpless widow she had pretended to be, nor as the dedicated wife she had been for decades, but as Martha, a 72-year-old woman, financially independent, mentally lucid, and finally free to write the next chapters of her own story, the end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope Martha's story has touched you deeply. This extraordinary woman's journey reminds us that strength has no age, that dignity cannot be negotiated, and that it's never too late to reclaim our self-worth. To continue following equally moving stories that explore the complexity of family relationships and the power of personal reinvention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If this narrative moved you, show your support by leaving a like on the video. This helps us reach more people who need to hear empowering stories like Martha's. Every day we bring unique narratives that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and explore the challenges we all face at different moments in life. Don't miss our upcoming content, and we really want to know what you thought of this story. We'll be waiting for you in the comments to share your reflections and experiences. Until the next story,